Hello everybody, this is Hades, and today we're doing the Warhammer 40k episode on Tyranid Genestealers. With me today I have Fonzie.
Yep.
And our good old biology expert, Panera.
Hello.
And as mentioned, we're doing the Tyranid Genestealers kind of unit that when it settles on a planet, it basically spreads the Tyranid genes across whatever species it encounters. And in turn it creates hybrids, which then sabotage whatever society that species has if it is sentient. Fonzie, is that correct?
Yep.
And you should clarify, there's, from what I know, there's a whole bunch of different types of these things, but, we're only doing the, pure strain?
Yep.
Yeah, we're only doing
so
the one that affects humans.
And it's important to clarify that because Warhammer fans you guys in the past have blown up my inbox about these things, and so we want to be clear about what we're talking about for you guys because you guys have got a crazy fan base.
No Yargamels, Broodlords, or Adrenaline. Just pure strain.
Yeah, that's what we have Fonzie for, so he can correct us on any lore.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope for the best. So, Fonzie, just explain... Well, I basically just give the cliff notes. Can you explain in detail what the actual purpose and the process of the Genestealer or the hybrids?
To use a quote, if I may, I can think of few greater xeno threats to the Imperium than that of the Genestealer, an apex predator possessed of an intelligence and cunning that rival our own. They exist for the sole purpose of reproducing in vast numbers and sowing utter chaos in their wake. So basically their job, their whole purpose of their existence is to go to a planet or a civilization, and their initial encounter is they'll take someone, male or female, and use a tongue-like appendage referred to as a ovipositor. I'm not
okay,
sure.
let Panera do it. He knows the Latin.
Ovipositor, which translates directly into basically egg positioner or layer, basically.
Thank you. And inject the victim with their DNA, and that victim doesn't remember it happening. They wake up and it's like a blackout for them, and then they go about their lives. Eventually, they'll reproduce. Then they'll give birth to their little hybrid babies, and the initial few generations are clearly not going to be humans. So,
okay, let me take over and clarify from what I've read. Basically, just from the information that Fonzie's provided me, basically within 4 generations, and this is you think of a human generation being roughly 20 years from when one person can grow up and then have a baby, and then that baby will grow up and have another baby. So we're talking about in the span of 80 years for, let's say, they came to Earth. From what I've read on this wikia we have here, they actually are, most of their traits are actually from the host. So they look like, let's say they came to Earth, they look more like humans, and then as the sort of go down the line towards this F4 gene, which I'm assuming means the 4th generation, F4 hybrid or whatever, that says basically at this point it will always spawn a pure strain Genestealer that's a genome identical to that of the original Genestealer. So basically it's a slow kind of progression taking over. Excuse me for coughing.
Yeah, that kind of brings up a question. Let's say you're in an infirmary. A woman gives birth to the F1 generation, the first hybrid. They see, a third additional arm. The wiki explains that they usually have a third, an additional arm. And they see the claws, that it looks like a Genestealer. Fonzie, please explain to me what keeps the doctor from just going, oh, guess this one's going in a trash bin, it's a hybrid. You're not allowed to reproduce anymore.
Here's the question I wasn't looking forward to. I'm not 100% sure. What I know about Genestealers comes strictly from reading at codexes or wiki pages regarding lore. I haven't actually read any books that have involved, storybooks that have involved Tyranids.
Some lore expert.
Burn.
You have no idea how many freaking books there are. Or how many races. Jesus. But basically, I would imagine something has to happen. Like the first few generations would have to be hidden away.
And that's what exactly what I just pointed out. Basically, they look. It says flat out on this wikia that they look more like the host being like, say, humans, right? So what you had hypothesized that they would know right from the get-go, oh, there's something wrong with my fucked up baby, let's light it on fire. Like they're not popping out like Ellen Ripley did in for those of you who watched Alien Resurrection, that famous scene where she's laying on the table, she's all like this big blob, she's like, kill me. No, they're not popping out like that.
Oh,
they're coming out more like
baby. No, they don't do that.
Yeah, I think they're coming out and it, at a casual glance, like for example, at this point in human medicine, it is possible to screen for certain genetic conditions, but even if we were aware of certain genetic anomalies, the morality involved, people wouldn't just say, okay, well, let's go and gutter stomp this baby because it came out a little bit fucked up in the genes. It still looks human, right? Or maybe it's got some dermatitis or some minor thing that they're just like, well, my baby's going to be a virgin until he's 30, whatever. I still love the thing.
Yeah,
so
it's
I think
not like we're 40,000 years in the future and you have that kind of technology to screen genetically if the baby's a hybrid or not.
Even if you could, presumably a race that advanced would hopefully, I would hope anyway, if we ever encounter one, would have the morality and ethics in place to not just go and fuck shit up and be eugenics and crazy like that. But that's just me.
The reason why I would say the first few generations would have to be secreted away is because the Imperium of Man, the human government, is incredibly xenophobic. They have been known during the initial forming of the Imperium. They purged whole planets of humans because they had alien genomes.
Well, here let me just
alien DNA in them.
Let me just read right to you from this thing here. Okay, I'll tell you flat out, they are hidden away. Newly born genestealer hybrids, although fundamentally genestealers, will have characteristics inherited from the host parent. Thus, a genestealer hybrid of human stock may have a vaguely humanoid head or only 2 arms instead of the usual 4, and perhaps its tail will be shortened or missing. So you're right in that they would, and I was incorrect in that they would be rather conspicuous. But that's a very curious thing. I mean, why, if they're this conspicuous at birth and you're getting a lot of them, like let's say you have, I don't know, do you have any idea how many numbers of these things are sent? Like 1, and then they go from there, like tens of thousands. If they're having tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of babies born with these traits, you're going to have some genetics looked into it, right?
I know one of the Genestealer's favorite tactics is to actually hijack ships, more or less, to get aboard ships and reproduce on the ships, and eventually then infiltrate human society. That has been done on numerous occasions. And in fact, I believe the first human contact with, confirmed human contact with Genestealers was aboard a Space Hulk. So, I mean, it's not like, I don't think that they go to the capital city, impregnate a woman, and then she goes to the hospital and gives birth to a fucked up baby. I think they're a bit more clever than that, and probably more choosy about who they initially target.
Yeah, they probably go to some village that doesn't have much technology, like
a small village, or like I said, an individual spaceship is a prime target.
Well, presumably it's a one-way trip, right? These things are landed. So why not just friggin' crash into an ocean and dog paddle, into town?
I mean, they very well could. I don't know about just full on crashing into an ocean, but
a controlled plummet kind of thing, kind of like oh gosh, what was that movie where they did a controlled fall? Was it Battle Los Angeles, where they did still have an impact off the coast of LA and stuff, but they slowed down and it was controlled. So it's maybe something like that.
Yeah, but
presumably it's a one-way trip anyway.
But I mean, they're not full on sentient, but they're incredibly intelligent, and they would be able to figure out, rudimentarily speaking, how best to infest a culture or a planet. I mean, being as it's their one purpose in life.
All right, but this brings up a point for Ponera. how could you actually modify the gametes or whatever reproductive cells in order to just kind of like inject your own genes
Well,
into it? It's a
well, I'm
virus.
not a very genetics isn't one of my strongest suits, but one of the better ways in which you can directly manipulate genes would be a virus. And this is something that humans have been doing for maybe 10, 15 years in experimental things with mice, maybe longer. I don't know. I'm not really keeping up with the medical journals and stuff. But I do know that there have been cases where was it hepatitis C? I want to say it was hepatitis anyway, that they had a virus, they reprogrammed a virus or something to attack its cell membranes. And so it is possible, because basically if you look at what a virus is, it's basically like a little reservoir of genes and sort of like a intermediate sort of organ, think of it kind of like a penis or like a needle that comes in, and it literally will inject into a cell, and then that will hijack the cell, and the cell will start reproducing the viruses. So it's a very similar kind of concept that we're seeing, only on a larger scale, right? And so with the Genestealer in general, but then they do say directly in this wikia, and I apologize, I have no idea about the lore, so whatever, but but basically it says, directly it says, where it deposits its DNA in the form of a type of virus that infects the somatic and germ cell lines of the host. So basically, what it's saying is that it goes after it's going after some of the, I would imagine, some of the less specialized cells, and from there it kind of can remain a little bit more anonymous, I guess.
Well, if you're
like
saying this is a
taking over
virus, then this actually would, I think, justify how it could assimilate more than one species. Let's say that Genestealer has maybe a virus for every set of chromosomes. So it has a virus for a species that has 22 chromosomes, and a virus that can affect a species with 23. So that way it's versatile.
Let me give you an example here. There's very few virus families that are what we call zoonotic. So that means that they can be infectious to both people and to animals. Probably the prime example of common virus that is sort of zoonotic, if you will, would be herpes. And I'm not saying that, if you go and have sex with a dog, you're going to give it your herpes that your dad gave you. No. What's going to happen is that related strains are going to be causing havoc. Like, for example, I know you're familiar with herpes, Hades, and for those, and so from your experience, I mean, you can imagine that it's not a very comfortable thing. But for, say, elephants, on the other hand, it's one of the worldwide main killers of elephants, other than, ivory, of course, but one of the main natural killers of them. So it could be a case where they just have sort of a broad spectrum virus that's not very specialized. The problem with using a virus, though, is that they have very rapid evolution, and they have a very strong tendency to get out of hand very quickly. So the problem with using these viruses is once you've used it, it's then in the regular population and doing things that you presumably don't want it to be doing, like causing plagues or, making Hades itchy, for example. So that's another issue.
Well,
just pointing that out.
I do know Tyranids are freaking amazing at specializations.
Well, we're saying exactly the generalist, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And one thing that I would also point out is that this is, and we're going to assume that with the lore in this series, that every species is using DNA and RNA and those two things. But it is feasible that there are things out there that aren't using DNA and RNA. Some life, and that would kind of stop the Genestealer dead in its tracks, right? So, yeah. But we're going to presume that the case is for the entire, all life in this particular sci-fi universe is using DNA and RNA. So anyway,
so that's that. Yeah, that's their purpose. And after several generations, it'll get to the point where it's going to be like normal looking people, and their job is to like infiltrate key positions, like in the military, in the government. I would imagine even like social services, like being like the chief firefighter guy or something like that. Like any position that would be important and whose destruction, removal, or just anything going wrong with it would be a detriment to withstanding an invasion from an outside force. As an example, like the Tyranid invasion's happening, and a lead general happens to be like a 5th or 6th generation Genestealer hybrid. He could very well give bad orders, like order an attack on his own positions, intentionally throw a battle, things like that. And that's their primary goal, is to cause that kind of chaos. And they generally, like, the element of surprise is, of course, very important in that regard.
Well, I think what you're suggesting is that they come with the intent and the purpose of infiltrating it in that way. And you don't necessarily have to be a like a general, right? I mean, look at what happened on, say, 9/11. All you need to do is something innocuous, like you'd think would be innocuous if you're getting invaded, right? Like blowing up a tower. But if you really want to cause havoc, I mean, that shut down the entire first world's pretty much air travel for like a couple days. And that creates a whole management issue itself.
Terrorist acts, of course, would be incredibly effective.
So that's one thing I think would be so. Okay, I guess
I think that covers pretty much the purpose and reproduction. Let's talk about the actual unit itself. I sent you all guys a picture, and this is the best one we could find. There's not, well, a lot of decent artwork at least. Most of them are just action figures that aren't even painted. But this one I think covers it pretty nicely. You can see the, what's the word for 6-footed? Bipedal, I know, is for 2.
Well, no, it is bipedal. Those aren't feet. Those are, like, the other 4 appendages are arms. 2 of which are claws, of course, like more designed for combat and damage, but they also are given, like rudimentary hands so they can operate consoles or machines or what have you.
Those are like full on opposable thumb, like ready to dance kind of. Like you could
presumably used for rape, so they can do their job.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they look like they could operate a vagina pretty good,
Well, that's not where I was heading, but yeah, maybe.
Well, those things practically take piloting. Come on, you need like a license.
They have an enlarged cranium.
I thought it was their ball sack.
So that they can have a larger brain than average.
Well, I mean, their tongue is the proboscis or whatever, osteo something that.
The ovipositor.
Yeah, thank you. The thing that transfers the genes, so maybe that's where they store their
tongue is okay. If you think about it this way, their tongue is effectively the dick. Effectively, it's the intermittent organ that moves the gametes and the genes and all that from one to another. So they've got a big dick in their mouth, and presumably the back of the head there is, you're right, a giant. It could be a nutsack.
Well, it looks soft, so
I'm pretty sure their skull is used to house a brain.
Well, I'm not saying that there's not a brain in there. I'm saying that it's not all brain. There's probably some testicle going on in there as well.
Well, I mean, wait, can you actually make a virus with a body, or do they just store it?
Oh yeah, all you need to do, because this guy is a living thing, and presuming that, from what we know, we can maybe make a reasonable assumption that yes, they're using cells and do cellular reproduction like any normal. Like right now, you are reproducing cells at a ridiculous rate, sloughing off, millions and millions of skin cells, for example. Those have to be replaced. So it's entirely possible that there's a reservoir of cells in there that the virus that's already in there is infecting, and just reproducing more viruses that way by hijacking just cells that are provided to it.
So inside that head, there are cells that reproduce, that serve as a little conduit or host for that virus to stay alive until it moves on to another body.
To reproduce its numbers, right? I mean, presumably it's not a limited supply of virus that they're provided with, because then at one point they just become useless. So.
All right, so that got the head covered. Head double meaning.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
I got that. I picked that one up.
What about the whole It looks like a freaking exoskeleton, and it has those alien spines.
It does have an outer carapace.
carapace.
Yeah, basically it
Yeah.
looks like you're right. It looks like there is some sort of carapace. I think the spines. I mean, I know they're meant to look like neural spines on like for example, if you rub your hand, say on the back of your neck, and you feel those bumpies or like down your back, those are all neural spines that are the pokey bits on your vertebrae, right, poking out. Those are meant to be like that, presumably to make it look more skeleton-y and scary or whatever.
Well, normally you'd want these for muscle attachment, but I don't see much there.
These are basically decorative, which is whatever, right? I mean, who gives a shit? They want them to look tough, or they want to, I don't know.
Yeah, but you'd think with its purpose, it's not meant for combat, it's just meant for infiltration. It would need to be more flexible in its movement. Would you say it's a good idea to have this thing armored as it is? Or would it restrict movement?
Well, if you look at how a lot of the plates are, like even on the arms and stuff, the main one on the back there, it looks like there's a lot of room for the arms to rotate.
I do believe they are double jointed.
Well, double joining doesn't mean anything.
Well, look at let's say the elbow on the closest arm to us. It's kind of sticking out, in a way.
Yeah.
So maybe it just looks that way because it's bent at this position. Maybe it has a lot of more range of movement, and maybe even the knee on the bottom.
What it probably means is that if you feel your own arm, the elbow joint itself, okay, the pointy part is actually part of the lower arm. Okay, that's actually part of what's called the ulna. And it forms kind of like a hinge. So that would be part of the ulna right there. And the reason why it points out and sticks like that is because it provides more torque and power and more works. You know how levers work, eh? If you're too dumb to know what a lever is.
Well, I'm a machine operator, so
yeah,
I've heard of levers.
I'm talking to the fans. If you're too dumb to know what a lever is, there's always Wikipedia and Google. But basically, it sticks out like that because there's probably some muscle insertion and attachment that come in from the top. And you'd have to, just Google, and I'm sure Hades will find a picture of this, of a human arm, the skeleton and the musculature and all that, and you'll see what I'm talking about with that. So that's not really a problem. I don't really see a lot of restrictive armor per se. Even if you look at the chest plates, there's a lot of what looks like joints there, and even on the main back carapace, it's not like a turtle shell, which is one solid fused basically hunk of bone, if you want to call it that, even though it's made up of tons of other little bones, but whatever. It's got this sort of groove running down on either side of it. So I think that provides a little bit of flexibility as well. And just because it's armored doesn't mean the armor itself isn't capable of flexing to some degree as well.
All right. One thing I was wondering about, back in the old ages of AoS, when Panera was doing this stuff by himself, I remember him bringing up the fact that when he was doing the Zergling, the wing was in a wrong place. I can kind of see the same thing with the arms. It's just right under that big back plate. Do you think that's slightly in a way, or maybe the legs?
Oh no, it's fine. I think the hips are located just fine. The problem again, you're seeing the top arm. Looks like it's in a pretty decent place if you've got a shoulder underneath that bulging carapace, which is entirely possible if it's sort of a concave surface on the underside of it.
Well, think about this, stick your arm in the front and just take your elbow as far back as possible. You can almost touch the wall behind you with your elbow with this plate in the back. They don't
necessarily need to do that. The thing that would be a problem would be the muscle attachments interfering with the two shoulders. That would be something that is often overlooked when doing anatomical modeling of any kind like this.
So that's not posing much of an issue, right?
No. The two arms the way they are. Yeah, the one that you were saying. Yeah, it doesn't really matter if they don't need to reach back behind them. Who gives a shit how far back they can move it? As long as it looks like they have a little bit of range there, so that's fine. It's just that having these two sort of stacked joints like this it's hard to really explain, partially because we actually don't have a vertebrate proxy for what's going on with that. So we don't know necessarily, there's presumably it's kind of difficult.
So there's not really much of oh, this thing sucks because the
Oh
anatomy
no, these
seems
things,
to
these
be
things
alright.
definitely suck. I mean, don't get me wrong; these things are fucking awful. They look stupid. They've got a dick in their mouth. They've got stacked shoulders. The
But the
fact
general physiology is okay.
well, it could be worse.
Well,
It
we've
could be
seen
worse.
worse.
I've seen worse.
Wow,
I've
so
seen
no real rage on this episode regarding the anatomy, but except for that whole reproductive thing. I mean,
Well, that was
geez,
just
this is pretty
fucking.
dark. You know, you're in a little alley and that thing jumps on you, infects
Oh.
you, sticks its tongue down its throat,
Well, it's
and you
a
don't remember
mouth
anything next
rapist.
day.
It's a serial mouth rapist, is what it is.
Ugh. All right, I guess that concludes it. To all our fans, thank you so much for requesting. We do listen to you. And as always, check us out on Facebook and Twitter, all that stuff. We'll post the links below. This has been Hades.
It's Fonzie.
Hi, I'm Steve.
Yeah, that guy who told me... But oh, disclaimer, I do not have f***ing herpes, alright? This has been Anatomy of Warhammer 40k Genestealer episode. See you guys next time. Peace.